Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being with us tonight. We're excited about this. This is our second in our series of CivicCon events, which CivicCon, in case you didn't know, stands for Civic Conversations. We're wanting to engage people in the conversation of how to make our communities more vibrant. I'm Troy Wayman. I'm the president and CEO of Acadiana. And Acadiana serves as the local chamber of commerce, but we also serve as a 9-parish economic development engine that drives economic development across the 9 parishes of Acadiana. We do that through partnerships with a number of local economic development organizations and a number of chambers of commerce, and we want to work to help all of those organizations to be successful and to thrive, and we want all of those communities to be vibrant as well. Because if those communities are vibrant, we're all going to be successful. We're all going to succeed. I'm excited about a couple of things. One of them is promises made, promises kept. Back in June, we had a vibrant community summit with Quint Studer. And many of you attended that, I know. It was a great event. It was probably the most exciting event I think that we've done in a very long time. And it got a lot of people excited and a lot of people engaged in working to make Lafayette and Acadiana as a whole more vibrant. Well, I stood up at the end of that, and I made 3 promises, much to my staff's chagrin. I made 3 promises. One, that we would initiate this CivicCon series. Well, we've done that. Another, that we would do a quality of life survey conducted by Mason-Dixon polling out of Washington, D.C. When we did that survey, we're going to do that survey again, by the way, so that we can measure our strides, measure our successes. And then the third one was to come up with a community dashboard, a regional dashboard that measured some of these quality of life issues as well as a number of other issues that are germane to our success in economic development and success as vibrant communities across the region. Well, tonight we're unveiling the third of those 3 promises. So I'm very excited about that. Very excited about unveiling those things now. We unveiled the quality of life survey results in our last CivicCon series. We have another CivicCon event that'll be coming up later this summer, so be on the lookout for information about that and about the topic. But tonight we're going to be talking about why measuring and messaging matters. You know, Quinn always makes the comment that what gets measured gets improved. Then, of course, he did point out the fact that, you know, we all measure our weight. That doesn't necessarily always get improved, but we're all, you know, I'll tell you personally, I'm working on that, so we'll see. Maybe the next CivicCon series, you'll see a new me up here. But we're excited about coming to terms with measuring and messaging. We're not trying to hide from the bad things in our community. We're going to address those things, but we want to focus on the positive messaging. And tonight you're going to hear from 3 fantastic speakers that are going to talk about the what, which is the dashboard and the data behind it, and then the why, which is the messaging piece that you're going to hear from another speaker or a third speaker later on tonight. This event would not be possible without our investors, without our sponsors, our presenting sponsors. Schumacher Family Foundation and LHC Group are our presenting sponsors. They're the ones that have made this event possible to be free for everyone who wants to participate. We have a number of people here in the audience. We also have a number of people online watching this event tonight. And then this event will also be available on vibrantacadiana.com later so you can go back and catch anything that you may have missed. Our supporting sponsors, the Pinnacle Group. I saw Rob Eddy out here. Rob, thank you. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Louisiana. And then this venue. This venue is fantastic, and I want to thank Sam. Sam, are you in the audience? There you are. Sam, thank you to the Acadiana Center for the Arts for working with us to use this venue and being a supporting sponsor of this event. We greatly appreciate it. So this would not be possible without those sponsors. And then last but absolutely not least is our media sponsor, the ones that are live streaming this event and who are helping us market this event, and that's the Acadiana Advocate. We couldn't be more excited to partner with them on this event. They're an investor of ours, and we're very, very fortunate to have them being our media partner on this event as well. One of the things I want to do real quick, I want to take a little point of privilege. This is not in the script, so Lindsay may shoot me and kick me off the stage. But I want to point out some First of all, the One Acadiana staff as a whole. If you're on the One Acadiana staff, raise your hand. These guys work tirelessly. They've got a lot of work to do because they're tasked with making me look good, which is a difficult task in and of itself. But I tell you, they are smart, they're driven, they're energized, and their work ethic is second to none. But I want to specifically point out Andre Bro. Andre has done phenomenal work on this Vibrant Acadiana initiative, and what we've been accomplishing so far through this initiative would not be possible without the hard work of Andre Bro and his team in policy at One Acadiana. So Andre, thank you. And if you'll notice, I'm wearing my black and red, which is for UL. UL recently received a Carnegie R1 research designation, which is a phenomenal thing. I think that a lot of the community may not fully understand the impact that that could possibly have for our entire region. That designation is coveted by a lot of universities. And I will say this, rumor has it that the expenditures flowing through UL on research may be bigger than another university in the state of Louisiana that will go unnamed, but it happens to be in Baton Rouge. So we're very proud of UL and their research capabilities and what they've done and what they've accomplished. Also, I'm wearing these UL colors because of our first two speakers. Our first two speakers are fantastic folks. We're incredibly fortunate to have a endowed chair in economics, an economist here with us, Dr. Gary Wagner. Dr. Wagner is one of those economists that can talk to us and not talk over our heads. I'll put it that way. Now, you may say that when you see some of his graphs, you may say, like, wait a minute, you said he wasn't going to talk over my head. But he will put the hay down where the goats can get it. I'll say that. So we're very fortunate to have Dr. Wagner. I've got somewhere in this script, someone turned my page. I've got his bio, and I've lost my place on it. So, Dr. Wagner, I may not read your bio. I may just go right into introducing you at some point. There it is. Dr. Gary Wagner is Acadiana business economist, endowed chair at the UL Lafayette B.I. Moody III College of Business Administration. In this role, he monitors the regional economic environment, conducts research and analysis, and disseminates results with the business community. Dr. Wagner will frame tonight's discussion with context on our regional economy. Our second speaker will be Dr. Stephen Barnes. Dr. Stephen Barnes is director of the Kathleen Blanco Public Policy Center at UL Lafayette, where he is also an associate professor in the Department of Economics and Finance. Dr. Barnes will add his perspective on the Acadiana economy and present the new regional dashboard co-created by the Blanco Center and One Acadiana. And he may be going to do this, but I want to point out someone who happens to be a former One Acadiana employee, Dr. Anna Oslin, who did a tremendous amount of work on this, and we are extremely proud of the work that she did working for the Blanco Center. And Dr. Barnes, I mean, if she was going to go anywhere, I guess we're okay with her going to you. So, but we appreciate the partnership that we have with the Blanco Center and the work that you do. Before we go to those speakers, though, I want to turn it over to one of our presenting sponsors, the Schumacher Family Foundation, Dr. Kip Schumacher. Without his input and without his support, we would not be able to have this as a free event, and we would not be able to do the entire series that we're doing as free events for anyone in the Acadiana region that wants to participate. He's a great supporter of One Acadiana, a great supporter of Acadiana as a whole, and his commitment to Lafayette in general and to Acadiana in general is second to none. So with that, I want to turn it over to Dr. Kip Schumacher.
Thank you, Troy. You know, on my and Keith Myers' behalf, I would like to thank everybody here for their interest in this CivicCon series. You know, 20 years ago, I had the opportunity to work with Quint to build a company that excelled in healthcare. That was the Schumacher Clinical Partners. over the past few years, we started spending more time trying to figure out how to give back to our community. And so when I heard about Quint's new programs that he was getting involved with that had to do with civic revitalization, that was very similar to the kind of the programs that he had to drive excellence in healthcare, I was all in. There was no question that anything that was going to come up with a playbook that helped us drive excellence and success was something that I was going to be supportive of. So I want to thank Quint personally for his willingness to share his vision, and I want to thank Troy and Acadiana for their leadership and the fact that they took on a project with the scope that this one has. No wonder you're worried about losing weight or gaining weight, because stress does that to you. But anyway, again, I also want to thank everybody here and would like to challenge you to not just participate, not just be interested in, but commit yourself to making Acadiana a better place to live, because we can. Together, we can make Acadiana a better place to live. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I want to first click the slide over, and I want to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Gary Wagner.
I hope you can hear me okay. It sounds like the mic is working. I want to thank all of you for coming out this evening. I also want to thank One Acadiana and the sponsors for this event. It's certainly a pleasure to be with you. You heard Troy mention something about his staff and how good they are, and I want to tell you a little story about Andre. So I first learned about this particular event in the dashboard in November. So I got an innocent email from Andre telling me about this dashboard and asking if I would mind coming by and giving him my thoughts on what the dashboard looked like, and I said, absolutely, happy to help. We have a couple innocent meetings, and all of a sudden, I'm standing before you on the stage. So I'm not exactly sure how that happened. I have to figure out what exactly he did to outsmart me, but here I am nonetheless. And what I want to try to do is give you a quick perspective on the regional economy as I see it. So I really want to touch on three things. I want to touch on what I'm going to call the past, the present, and the future. So how has our economy evolved over the last 25 years or so? How are we recovering from the pandemic recession? And then lastly, how do I think we can position ourselves to be competitive in the future? It's a pretty dense presentation, as Troy mentioned, and I've got to go through things, I think, pretty quickly in the amount of time that's been allotted to me. But I'm a pretty easy person to track down, so if you happen to see any questions or have any questions or would like the slides, feel free to reach out to me later on. So let's start with the past. And when I think about the past, I want to think about how our region has transformed itself over the last 25 years or so. I know there's a lot going on in this chart. It's probably the most complicated one I'm going to show you. But essentially, this is showing you the different sectors of the region's economy. All the sectors on the right are regions that have been growing in the last 30 years. All the sectors on the left are sectors that have been contracting in terms of jobs over the last 30 years. And I really want to point out two particular things. So I want to highlight these two circles here. So the blue circle is oil and gas. That number 12 tells us in 1990, 12% of the Acadiana region's jobs were concentrated in the oil and gas industry. In 1990, about 12% of our jobs were concentrated in manufacturing, 11.9 to be exact. You'll notice both of those sectors are contracting. In fact, the oil and gas sector has contracted 40% between 1990 and 2019. Manufacturing has contracted 30% over that 30-year period. So going back to 1990, essentially 1 out of every 4 jobs in our region were either in manufacturing and oil and gas. That's not the case any longer. In fact, if you look all the way to the right, you'll see the gold dot, which is at 7.9%, roughly 8%. This is what we now call eds and meds. So it's education and health services. In 1990, that was about 8% of our jobs. That's changed drastically, as I'm going to show you in just a minute. But that sector as a whole has grown about 110% over the last 30 years. This is a really remarkable transformation for a region in a relatively short period of time. So our economy is evolving. And in fact, you can see it a little bit more clearly if you kind of focus in on this chart. So I know lots of colors, I'm trying to highlight the ones that are really important. The left is showing you, this is just for Lafayette Parish, but it's showing you where our jobs were in 1990. The pie chart on the right is showing you where our jobs are in 2020. And you can see oil and gas was about 14% in 1990. It's less than 6% today. So it's been cut by more than half. But look at education and health services. So about 9% in 1990, almost 20% today. So now 1 in 5 jobs in Lafayette Parish are in these quote-unquote eds and meds. If you add in professional and business services, which is the pink slice, basically 1 in 3 jobs in our region are now really in these very service-oriented sectors. So again, when I look at this, it's a really remarkable transformation in a really short period of time. And there's a reason why I'm talking about this story, and I'll kind of lead in with this chart. So this is showing you might wonder why I'm showing you Texas and New Mexico. This is the percentage of state GDP. So state GDP is the gross domestic product. It's the broadest measure of economic activity. This is showing you state GDP for 2 states that have historically been very heavily concentrated in the oil and gas industry, Texas and New Mexico. So you go back to 1981, you can see in New Mexico, 26% of the whole state's economy was directly dependent in oil and gas. Well, look at Louisiana. 1981, we were at almost 36%, more than a third of the overall state's economy. Now that number in 2020 is 1.1%. My guess is when the 2021 figures come out, it'll be less than 1%. But you see, this is a broad trend, as I'm going to show you in just a second. It's a broad trend that's happening nationally. And this is really being driven by technological advances among several different dimensions. First of all, we've had changes in energy efficiency over time. Right? We've had technological advances in oil and gas extraction. The key one that comes to mind, of course, would be fracking. And then the last thing that we see here is we've had developments in alternative sources of energy. And all of these things are much broader trends than what we have the ability to control locally. And you can see that nationally by looking at kind of this chart. So this is showing you just across the nation what percentage of every state's economy is really being driven by oil and gas. And if you look at the states that are the highest, Alaska's at 5%, North Dakota's at 7.1%, which basically means if you even take the 2 states where we have the most concentrated oil and gas industry in the nation, 95% of their economic activity comes from something else. And you can see we still have the energy core of the country really driven down from North Dakota to Texas and over to Louisiana. But the reason why I wanted to point this particular chart out to you is not to suggest that the oil and gas industry is not going to be an important component of our region's future. It is, and it will be. In fact, in the Acadiana region, about 5 to 6% of our jobs are directly related to oil and gas, and that industry pays almost double the average of every other industry. So it's a very important piece. The reason why I think this is important is when we think about the future, or at least when I think about the future, I'm thinking about also these longer run trends that are really being driven by a lot of global factors that are probably outside of our local control. And at least to just keep those things in context as we're thinking about how we progress forward. So let me shift a little bit now to what I'm going to call the present, the pandemic, recession, and how we're recovering. Again, there's a lot going on in this chart, so let me take a quick second to explain it, but I think if you've seen me present anything, I think this is the best visualization for where the economy is currently at. So the numbers on the left are how much employment dropped nationally during a recession. The numbers across the top are how many months it took to gain those jobs back. So for example, that line right there is the July 1981 recession. We lost a little over 2% of our jobs nationally, and it took about 28 months to gain those jobs back. So this is the 1991 recession. So you can see, again, just shy of 2% of our job losses, significant number of months to gain those jobs back. This is the 2001 recession. Again, about 2% of our jobs lost nationally. Now we're out to about 4 years before we gain those jobs back. This was the financial crisis, what we used to call the Great Recession. So you can see we lost about 6% of our jobs nationally, but it takes almost 6 years to gain those jobs back. This is the pandemic. So we lost about 14% of our jobs. The good news is the recovery has been pretty quick relative to historical standards. We're actually just below 2% nationally in terms of recovery. So we're not quite back to where we were in the fourth quarter of 2019, but at least nationally, we're not too far off. So a natural question might be, well, how does Louisiana and how does Acadiana compare to this? And so I've got that in a separate chart here. This dotted black line is just the national economy, and you can see we're currently about 1.3% below where we were in the fourth quarter of 2019, so pre-pandemic. This is Louisiana, about 5.9% below, and here's Acadiana. So we didn't lose quite as many jobs as the nation, but Louisiana and Acadiana have been recovering them at a bit of a slower pace. We're at about 5.3% below. So we've gained back, as you'll see in a second, about 45% of the jobs that have been lost in the pandemic recession. So we still have a little bit of a ways to go to get back to what feels like normal, which is the last quarter of 2019. And in fact, if you break it down by sector, you'll see something interesting as well. So this is looking at individual sectors statewide. So this is Louisiana. The Acadiana picture looks very, very similar. And all the sectors that are in green are sectors that have gained jobs since April 2020, essentially since we've started to quote-unquote reopen the economy. The sectors down there that are in red are sectors that have continued to lose jobs since April 2020. So we're statewide just shy of 60%. Right now, if you wanted to stack Louisiana up relative to the other 50 states, we rank 47th in terms of the recovery. But I think one thing that also jumps out to me here, you've got oil and gas, manufacturing, both of those sectors have continued to shed jobs post-April 2020, which is, again, partially due to this longer running trend that we're seeing nationally of changes in the industry, and these are really hard things to turn around, at least locally. But if we want to focus on statewide just for a second, you can see the recovery has been pretty steady with the exception of Lake Charles. So the Lake Charles MSA, so the MSAs are metropolitan statistical areas, so they're a collection of parishes that are established by the Office of Management and Budget in the White House, and they're basically based on commuting patterns. So the Lafayette MSA, which is shaded there in gray, is the 5-parish region that's based on how interconnected we are in terms of our commuting, so where people live and where people work. And you can see we've gained back about 46% of our jobs. Lake Charles is really struggling, of course, because of the 2 hurricanes that hit really in 2020. And so they're lagging behind, but we're slightly behind where we've been relative to some of the other MSAs in the state. So that's the good news, or the bad news. Here's the good news, I guess. The outlook for the Acadiana region is very strong over the next year. So 4 times a year, I produce the Louisiana Economic Activity Forecast, which is a projection on key indicators for the state and also the 9 metro areas. The Lafayette MSA is all the way on the right. You can see historically, we've averaged job growth of just under 1%, about 0.9%. So we're going to see job growth over the next year, likely well above that number. This certainly does not take into account the recent events in Ukraine, but it does take into account the fact that the Federal Reserve is likely to raise interest rates at least 3 times over the next year, as they've signaled, probably starting in a couple of weeks. So that information is essentially baked into this, but I think the outlook is very favorable. And then kind of tying this off, the last thing I want to talk about is very quickly the future. So thinking about economic development, or at least how one person thinks about economic development, I tend to think about economic development as why some regions grow and other regions do not grow. And in a sense, what's really happened is that the knowledge-driven economy that we have heard so much about has really changed and reshaped the landscape of regional growth. And I think that's even more true post-pandemic than it was pre-pandemic. And in fact, focusing on what really drives growth, it's really this idea of value creation. So what is it that we do here locally, given our unique or indigenous strengths, that allow us to create new goods and services that we can sell to people outside of our region? So to me, there are kind of two large pieces that I think about this. One is this idea of entrepreneurship, right? It's the idea of being innovative, being creative. And I don't have the chart to show you this, and I feel like now I should have put it in here. Acadiana, when you measure it by patents, is by far the most innovative region in the state of Louisiana. We're actually just below the national average for metro areas, which is really good given our size, but we're more than twice as innovative as every other region in the state. So that's a very significant feather in the cap for us. But I think the second piece to this is not only creation of knowledge, but what people call or define as tech transfer, is how do we take these great ideas and turn them into marketable goods and services? And those are really two key pieces of how our region's going to grow moving forward. But, you know, I often think about the commercial where you can press the easy button and wonder, you know, is there some magic formula for economic growth? If you look at the mid-20th century, the regions that we saw growing more rapidly around the nation tended to be in the Northeast and also in the Midwest. What I would call these mid-20th century firms, they were really dominated by these large vertically integrated companies. Those were really good in the short term. Turns out they were not really good at reinvention, and that's one thing that I think is really important going forward. And I think we've got three different things that really define successful regions, or that will define successful regions. Regions that have smart, or what I'll say, well-trained workforce, where we have small firms that are very dynamic and nimble so they can reinvent themselves. And then lastly, regions that are well connected to the outside world. And I can't stress enough how important I think this connected to the outside world is going to be when we think particularly of how the COVID era pushed so much work being remote in a way that we never thought was possible a few years ago. Now all of a sudden, there's going to be a greater disconnect between where people potentially live and where people potentially work. Being connected is going to be incredibly important. Having strong outside connections, a friendly business environment, and a community, I think, like we have, where we have amenities that make it an overall nice place to live, are going to be the areas that really prosper moving forward. And so with that, I'd like to turn the floor back over to Troy.
Like Dr. Wagner, you basically made our economic development pitch for us, so I appreciate that. You're probably wondering what the card next to your seats or on your seats is about. I hesitate to point this out because I don't want you guys searching through this while Dr. Barnes is making his presentation, but just for reference, you can use that QR code and it'll take you directly to the dashboard that we're unveiling tonight. So take those cards with you, share that QR code. For those of you watching online, you can visit vibrantacadiana.com and access the dashboard there. But for those of you here, if you want to, you can just scan that QR code and it'll take you right to it. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Dr. Stephen Barnes to tell us all about the dashboard that they created.
All right, good evening. It's a pleasure to see everybody here tonight, and very excited to share with you all the dashboard. I wanted to make sure not only do you have this at your desk, but we put it up here on the screen because I want to make sure everyone has connected to this dashboard tonight before you leave. So I'm going to give you a look and kind of walk you through it up here in a minute, but definitely make sure that you've connected with it at least once tonight, because this is something we want to make sure that you're looking at, exploring, digging in deeper, and then coming back to see updates over time. Before I get into that dashboard, though, I'd like to kind of draw out a few additional thoughts from some of what you heard from Dr. Wagner just a minute ago, and thinking about the changing economy. So we've heard a lot about how the economy has been changing, and included in that is major changes in the way that we work. So when we think about what this pandemic has done, it's not only obviously sent people home immediately in a major way, in a way that we had never done before, but the chart we're looking at here shows from Google mobility data time spent at the workplace. And we can see after some initial recovery, we really saw that level out for the most part. We've got some seasonal bumps up and down here and there, but even now, close to 3 years later, we're looking at, or close to the third year of this pandemic starting here, we're looking at time at the workplace about 16% lower than what it was pre-pandemic on a typical day. In addition, when we look at something like the American Time Use Survey, comparing data nationally from 2019 to 2020, we saw that percent of days work from home nearly doubled over the course of just a year. And just for reference, in 2019, that number was 22%. So for a lot of us, we think of working from home as a new thing, and for many of us it was. But this is a trend that has been in place that has been rapidly accelerated over the last couple of years due to this pandemic. And so a lot of these trends that we've seen happening, I think, have been shaken up and in many ways accelerated. And so that's changing how we think about economic development. That's changing how we think about making our communities places that people want to live, they want to stay, and grow a family, and contribute towards a growing and vibrant community. So along those lines, when we think about the future of economic development, there's some things that have always been in the conversation, but they've been elevated, and they're more important now, I think, than they have been in a long time. So broadband and access to reliable, high-speed internet is now critical. Certainly been a valuable part of quality of life, but more than ever, that is something that we think is critical towards future economic development, something that has certainly been a priority for One Acadiana and other partners in the region, but we've seen a lot of work by the Acadiana Planning Commission and a big broadband report they've recently released on the topic. But we also need to think more critically about investing in quality of life, making this a place that people want to live. When people no longer have to tie the place that they live with the place that they work, there's a lot more freedom to choose where we want to be. We need to be making investments in our downtowns, making them attractive to the population that wants to live there. We need to have high quality schools. We need to be cultivating our outdoor recreation assets and making our cities places that people want to live. So when we think about some of those things, we've put together a dashboard that helps to highlight some of those key assets and some of those things that we want to be focused on as we work together to try to push forward quality of life, make this a place that people want to live, and make sure we're really cultivating those important assets for economic development. So without further ado, I'm going to take you into this dashboard. And very proud to be sharing the culmination of a lot of work at the Blanco Center. Again, at the top, Troy recognized Anna Oslin and her work, and we've got Matthew Holland here as well. Has put a lot of work into this, along with some others at the Blanco Center. So thank you both for your work. And I'll start just by introducing, if you've already gone to this, you scan the QR code, you pulled this up on your phone, you get a little bit of a different look if you go to this on a computer. And so I'll show you those things side by side. The really neat thing about this dashboard is it works great in either format, on a large screen format or on a mobile device. And when you first come to this dashboard, you're going to get a landing page. And I'll walk you through that landing page. As you scroll down, you're going to see a summary of key information across 4 different major areas that we've put together in this dashboard. And so as you imagine kind of scrolling down that first home page, the first section you get to is population. The general layout of this dashboard is going to give you highlights for some of the major data series that we've included. So for population, you're seeing total population at the city level, at the parish level, at a regional level, with some highlights of recent trends and kind of important takeaways. In terms of population, we're also going to zero in and look at that 25 to 34 age group, which is a real key demographic for thinking about holding on to our talent and helping to make sure that employers in the region have access to those highly trained, highly skilled individuals, that have just finished their schooling and are ready to enter the workforce. And also, that's the time when people do moving at a higher rate than any other age demographic. So if we can keep people here in that critical window, they're likely to build a life here and stay here long term. And so for any one of these particular data series, you'd have an opportunity to click on that View Data button and bring you into a dashboard, and we'll go take a look at that in a minute, and get a lot more detail, including historical data and an opportunity to interact with those data. But as you scroll down that initial landing page, you'll get the next section here summarizes some employment data. And so for employment data, we're not looking just at those headline employment numbers. We're trying to help put together a richer picture of what the landscape really looks like in the region. So we've got total employment. We're also looking at labor force participation, recognizing that there's a significant portion of the population that is sitting on the sidelines, not engaged in the labor force. And that's something that we've seen take a serious move down nationally and in the region with the pandemic. So tracking that and keeping an eye on that as we think about strategies for helping to draw people back into the labor force, I think is an important one. We've got the unemployment rates as well. And then finally, median household income, which I'll mention, that's one that I'm particularly excited about because we had an opportunity there to bring in some recently released data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, which gives us a more accurate picture of the true cost of living in different parts of the country than something we've seen really ever before. So there have been other series out there, but this is a relatively new series from the federal government that gives us a much clearer picture of how we really stack up compared to the state as a whole or the nation. And so we've adjusted those median household income figures so we can get a more realistic picture of what this means. I think that's great to give us a clear understanding of where we are today, and that'll be important moving forward as we work towards increasing incomes in the region and seeing how we're really stacking up when you take into consideration the changes in cost of living or differences in cost of living in different parts of the state. So moving further down the page, we've got a series of data on education. And these are really highlights of some of the key data points from the 55 by 25 dashboard that One Acadiana developed that we are continuing to support as part of our partnership at the Blanco Center with One Acadiana. And here we're really highlighting a few key data points from that full spectrum of the education system. So if we want to have a highly educated population here and a skilled workforce that's ready to help grow the economy, we've got to make sure that we're thinking about post-secondary attainment, but we've really got to start laying the foundation in the K-12 system, if not before. So we're looking at third grade reading proficiency, high school graduation rates, college enrollment rates, and then finally post-secondary attainment for the region as a whole. And then our last section of data is looking generally at well-being. And this is a collection of several kind of different data series that help give us a picture of some quality of life related issues throughout the region. So child poverty, crime data, house prices, and finally broadband access. And so in each of those earlier sections, you go into that view data section and you can see a dashboard that kind of lays out a summary of all of those data points. For these well-being series, each one of these brings you to a separate dashboard because we had enough different pieces of data we wanted to share there. So a lot more to come there. All right, now to give you a sense of what this really looks like. So when you get to the website and you click on View Data, you will be brought into a topical dashboard like this that gives you a chance to interact with the data. So these are not static views. You can interact with the data. You can zoom in on particular time periods or particular regions. And again, this is accessible both on the web and with mobile devices. So for example, you can use the drop-down menus to highlight or deselect certain regions so that you can put together a customized view that might be more relevant for questions or your regional context that you're looking at. Similarly, you can interact with the graphs themselves. You can zoom in, you can highlight and select certain series or highlight on particular points and really get your hands on the data, so to speak. So this was designed to make sure that every one of you and everyone else throughout the community is able to really see this firsthand, interact with the data, engage with the data, and develop a deeper understanding of some of these fundamental features and data points relative to the region. And so again, when we go to, say, the employment section, there's another dashboard corresponding to that section. Similarly, a separate dashboard for education, and I won't scroll through all of the different visualizations that we have here. And then for well-being, again, for that one, we've got separate dashboards for each of those 4 different metrics. So, to recap and kind of summarize, what is the data that we've brought together to sort of put on the table, so to speak, to offer a baseline understanding, and for data that we'll want to come back to time and time again to track progress in the region. We've got population data broken out by different regional details, including total population and the 25 to 35 age group. Employment and labor force, again, at different geographies. Those selected education data series. And then under well-being, we've got child poverty, crime data, typical home value data from Zillow, and broadband access data. And in all cases, we've made a point to try to bring in multiple metrics so that you can get a richer understanding of what this looks like, whether you're looking at the total numbers or the percentage relative to the whole. And we're bringing in state level and national benchmarks where possible, so we can make sure we've got a really honest assessment of where we are as we work together to try to move all of these things forward. And with that, I will turn it back over to Troy.
Stephen, thank you very much, and thank you for the work you did and your entire team did on developing this dashboard. We greatly appreciate the partnership that we have with you guys, and I think this is a great result of that partnership, and we look forward to working with you for many, many years to come. I will point out one thing. Did anyone else notice that the bike lane sign, there's a guy riding a bike with a tuba? I mean, like, is that safe? I don't know that that's safe. Anyway, our next speaker is, you've heard now on the what, the data and the dashboard. Our next speaker is going to talk to us a little bit about the why. Dottie Dehart. Met Dottie through Quint, and she did some work with us as a staff early on in this vibrant Acadiana process, and we got a lot of value out of that, and we've really enjoyed getting to know Dottie. I'm going to read her this little bit of a bio here. She's principal at Dehart & Company, where she has become a seasoned media specialist. I don't usually like to use the word seasoned. That makes it sound like I'm calling you old, and I don't mean to do that at all. She also supports Quint Studer as publicist and member of the Vibrant Community Partners team. Dottie is going to round out this presentation by explaining, as I mentioned, the why behind the measurement tools like the regional dashboard and our recent quality of life survey. And she'll tie it all together by explaining the why behind the broader Vibrant Acadiana initiative and how we can all play a role as positive messengers and evangelists for a more vibrant community and region. Dottie? You want that, or are you going to stay at the podium? Okay.
Hi, can you hear me? As the mother of a theater kid, I'm never on this side of it. You guys don't mind if I do Don't Cry for Me Argentina real quick, do you? I always wanted to do that. Sorry for the notes, but I recently was at a venue and I could not see the teleprompter because suddenly I'm old and can't see anything and I can't remember anything. And as the mother of 4 children, they're all encouraging me to go ahead and head to the nursing home. They said, Mom, you're going to want a good seat. We know that about you. So thank you so much for having me. This was my first time in Lafayette. I had to be trained that you're not Lafayette, and I'm good on that now. But the first thing I thought when I came into your downtown is, you don't need me. You have an amazing downtown. I didn't get to spend much time here. I was only here for about an hour, but I'm in and out of a lot of small towns, and this is an incredible downtown, so you got lots of good things going your way. As a speaker, the first thing I always ask is, who do I follow? And when they told me 2 economists, I got kind of nervous because I thought, you know, they're going to look really smart. But then I thought, this is my chance to be the most interesting person on the program. And I normally follow Quint Studer, so that's great for me because you know what a great speaker he is. The other thing that you always ask yourself when you're a speaker is you kind of think of what's your walk-up song, because it kind of gets you like in the mood. And the song that comes to mind for me is a Phil Collins song, and I'm probably dating myself here, but you guys look like you might know this song. But it's called Something in the Air, and I think there is something in the air in Lafayette and with One Acadiana, because the energy and the enthusiasm here is unbelievable. You guys are famous, and you probably don't know this yet, but Quint talks about you everywhere he goes. When he came back from his visit here, the first thing he said to me is, this is going to be our benchmark group right here. There's something special about this group. And when they came to EntreCon, I noticed there is something special about the people here. The interesting thing about them being at EntreCon, I thought they must have brought about 10,000 people, because every person that I asked, where are you from, they all said Lafayette. Everywhere you look, they saturated Pensacola. They were everywhere you looked. But he talks all the time about, there's this thing about ideas and coaching and teaching, but there are very few people who can take the ideas and really get them over the finish line. And what I think you guys do better than anybody else that we're ever involved with is that you execute and you get things done. So congratulations to you for getting these two big initiatives across the finish line, because they're important. They're really important. The quality of life survey and the dashboard are just so important to what you're trying to do. What happened is I was Quint's publicist for about 20 years, and we have written about 14 books together now, I think, and he got out of healthcare. I'm a freelancer, so my PR firm specializes in books and speakers, and so I still repped a lot of people, but he was still set up on my Google alerts. And I kept getting dinged and dinged and dinged, Quint Studer, Quint Studer, Quint Studer. And I called him up and said, what are you doing? Because, he sold his company, and I didn't think he was working anymore. And he said, I want you to come down to Pensacola. I think I've got an early learning city. And I went down to Pensacola and spent about a week, and I said, oh, honey, you have something so much bigger than that. You have the blueprint for how you grow a vibrant community. So in 4 months, we crashed this book called Building a Vibrant Community. And we just took what we knew, what had worked in Pensacola. We benchmarked a lot of other places and put together what we thought were kind of best practices for growing a vibrant community. Well, what happened is in the course of doing that, so many of the things that we learned about leadership and growing organizations and managing change, and he had a 40-year history of being a CEO. So he took all the business practices that he had learned from running a hospital, and we put them in this book. And I tell you, it has been the best thing I've ever done. It's my favorite project I've ever worked on. Now, being in the book business, I spent a lot of time in big markets like LA, Chicago, New York. I love working in small town America. It is actually what I'm about, and I'm incredibly passionate about it. I should tell you, I'm from a small town, Hickory, North Carolina. And so whenever I work with big New York City firms, I always send this to them and just say, hey, I'm sorry I'm late, I'm stuck on the subway. And they always get a big kick out of it. But being part of a community like this is something that is really important to me. And I get just as engaged as you are. In fact, I'm already thinking I'd like to try to buy one of these lofts and move here. But I'm passionate about small towns. I'm passionate about the people in them. I'm passionate about the work that you guys are doing and are able to do, because in a small community like this, you can really move the needle on things, and you're already doing that with your dashboard and your other metrics that you're measuring right now. So I'll tell you, whenever we work inside organizations, hospitals, businesses, wherever, the very first thing we ask them is, what are you measuring? Because what you measure lets us know what you treasure. So this dashboard and then your quality of life survey really do show the things that you should care about as a community. The two of these things together are incredibly powerful because the dashboard measures something quite different than the quality of life, and the dashboard measure two different things. The quality of life really measures how people feel about things, how they're feeling about opportunity, how they're feeling about the government, how they're feeling about the local business environment, how they feel about opportunities. The dashboard really measures hard data, crime, other statistics, jobs, that sort of thing. So together, they're a really powerful combination. The third leg of that stool is your civic education and your civic engagement, because data is only as good as you being able to turn it into information and then to knowledge and wisdom. And what the civic education piece of this does is it tells you what that data really means. Otherwise, you see the numbers and they don't mean anything to you. By the way, I thought our two economists did a fabulous job of making sense of this, what it means for the average bear, what all these numbers mean. I've been to a lot of these presentations, and they did a spectacular job of drawing you in and telling you what the numbers mean and then kind of what you need to do to move forward. We always start with objective data because we find that it solves a lot of our other problems. The first thing it does is it helps you make decisions based on facts and not opinions. You're in a community. What I know about communities sometimes is the loudest voices actually drive what happens as opposed to what really needs to happen. And there's sometimes assumptions that get made that are generations old that until you look at the data, you might not know that they're not right. I think you probably saw some things that surprised you in your quality of life survey. We find that every time we go in, people look at the data and they say, wow, that's not what we thought was happening. So I think that it does help you challenge those assumptions, but it also helps bring some sense to the room so that the loudest people don't get heard. I have to tell you a story. We were in a town in Florida, and the city council had a pretty aggressive strategic plan, and they were 6 months behind on it, and we were really holding their feet to the fire. And we said, you know, what's going on? Why can't you get this done? And they said, well, there's so much pushback in the community. It's just terrible. There's all this backlash. And it turns out it was just 3 really loud people. That's all it was. And with social media, you know that the voices can get very, very loud. So with the objective data, it really helps you understand where you need to be without the loud people. Usually very happy or content people don't say anything, and that's the problem. It also helps you get an accurate diagnosis. Now, you know, if you got a person who comes from healthcare writing the book, he's going to want to start with a diagnosis. Our feeling is that if you don't accurately diagnose the problems, the likelihood of you treating them the right way and with the right medicine is probably not going to happen. The other thing objective data does is it helps you create a tailored approach for your city. When you get excited about things, and you're excited now about moving the momentum that you've got, it's really typical for you to start looking at other communities and see what they do. But every community has its own challenges that are unique to you and unique opportunities. So the data really helps you see how you can tailor an approach to what makes sense for your community. It really also creates this clarity around what you need to do. When you have a big list of things that you need to fix in your community or even fix anywhere, the first thing you gravitate towards are the things that are easy. And sometimes those are secondary fixes. You know, you ever do this thing where you have a day of big things you need to do and you say, I need to do these 20 little things first, and at the end of the day, the only thing you got done are those 20 little things? What we really like about having the data in front of us is it helps us sequence what we need to do. So you can exhaust yourself by doing little things that might not matter. They need to be done, but they're not as important. But the data really helps you see, hey, what do we need to do and what order do we need to do it in? It also, having the data keeps you from making mistakes. You ever go down the wrong road for like a really long time and you don't want to turn back because you go, oh, we've come this far? if you can see the data, and mistakes in communities are expensive. They're not only financially problematic, but they create this situation where everybody says, here we go again, that didn't work, that's not going to work. So I think that if you can think about taking the data and just making sure that you figure out what you need to do, because otherwise you could make these mistakes that set you back. And a mistake in a community really, really sets you back with morale and momentum. Oops. I skipped one. It also gets people focused and really creates this sense of urgency. Once you see what needs to be fixed, particularly around education and things like that, your value system won't let you walk away from it as citizens. So I think that it also gets people focused because it gets them to rally around things. Like, look at you guys here tonight. You probably wouldn't be talking about these things if you didn't have the data in front of you. So I think it's really valuable for that kind of thing. It also starts the conversation around civic engagement, and that's where we really try to push the needle hard inside these communities, is just getting people talking, creating a common language. Not that long ago in Pensacola, nobody had any idea what a street diet was. But now that we've had all the data people come in and we've had all the CivicCon speakers come in, we all kind of have this common language that everybody understands what we're talking about. And I think that, just getting the conversation started, the best ideas start to bubble to the top, and it gets you thinking about things in a different way. And good things, as you know, start when people in the community start having these conversations, is when it gets really fun and bubbles up and the momentum gets going. This is my single favorite point in this whole list of value of objective data, is it really helps you deal with negativity and generalities. Do you ever have people say, everybody thinks? Quinn always tells the joke that that's not possibly true because there's never been a time where everybody agreed on anything. But those people tend to be the loudest and carry the biggest messages. And when you have the data in front of you and you can see what needs to be done, it really helps you combat those kind of people. And I think that whenever you have, and those kind of generalities are really dangerous in our community, because other people start to believe the same thing from the people who are saying things that may not be true. The other thing that I think that it really helps with is the negativity. And a lot of the times people that are being really negative about things aren't telling the truth. I think they tell the truth as they know it, but they've got the facts wrong. I love this story in Pensacola where 7 elections, they were not able to get a law overturned where their school superintendents were actually elected, not appointed. So they had a lot of trouble getting people who were really qualified to do the job when they were electing a school superintendent. And the person who was leading the charge to get this law overturned so that you could actually appoint a high-quality school superintendent was at a basketball game with his son, and he heard somebody behind him talking about, they're taking away my vote, this is how bad it is, it's corrupt, they're, blah, 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 the things people say. And he was about to turn around and correct the person, and the mother beside him did it and said, I want you to know that's not true. So they had blanketed the community with a lot of data about the value of a good, solid school superintendent that was appointed. And so pretty soon, people start correcting misinformation if you have data. If you don't have data, it's really difficult to do that. It also promotes ownership. When you see this data in black and white, it's pretty easy to see who in the community should own it and where the resources should come from. So it gives you something to celebrate. It's this thing that we call bright spots. It makes them easier to see. Quint and I were in a small town in Florida, and the first thing Quint asked him is, why do you guys live here? And of course, Quinn asked, said, tell me about your community. and they started complaining nonstop, one thing after another, and Quint said, if I were you, I would pack up and leave right now. I would not live here if I were you. Well, you know, that made them mad. And so they immediately started spouting out like all the amazing things about their community. And the next day, the newspaper said, outsider Quint Studer identifies bright spots in our community. So if you're waiting for an outsider to point out the bright spots in your community, you're making a huge mistake, because the people in this room right here are kind of going to be the fire starters for what needs to happen in this community by promoting positivity and making negativity socially unacceptable anymore. Because, you know, I live in a community where we just built these 2 big wooden arches over, we're trying to emulate Greenville, South Carolina in our community. Now, when these arches were up, people were taking pictures, prom pictures. It was a great thing to take out the family. Unfortunately, these arches fell, and it's been a pretty big tragedy. But the poor community leaders that decided to do this have taken a beating in the process here. And, you know, there's all kinds of misinformation floating around. I just did a strategy session with them on how to combat that. But as you know, trying to do anything to move a community forward, it's like the crab trying to crawl out of the bucket, right? For whatever reason, people will pull you back in. But you guys are kind of the heart and soul of what needs to happen on the messaging for all this stuff. I thought the data that he gave was unbelievable in terms of arming yourself with that kind of thing. The thing I really like about it is it really helps you see the improvement. When you do these surveys year over year and you can see the numbers starting to move, that's when the excitement starts to build. That's when the momentum starts to happen. That's when you start with like a group of 10 and then 10 more come in and 10 more come in, because people want to be on a winning team. You know, they want to be part of something, watching the community move in the right direction. The other thing I like about these 2 measurement tools is they also really help you accelerate. You can execute and you can do, you know, the process is long and hard. I think Quint's probably already told you that. It's painful. There's a lot of burnout for people who are trying to push it through, because you do have kind of the crab in the bucket thing with people pulling you back in. But it's hard, and the reason is it's everybody's job, but it's nobody's job. And if you're and you know, we believe in business-led vibrancy, where we really promote that businesses should be the ones leading it. Now, we think there's a place for government, keep our communities clean, safe, and easy to do business, but we really believe that business should be the leader in this sort of thing. And it kind of is, business leaders get busy, and they have to, you know, especially during COVID, many people were rolling up their sleeves and actually working the front line in their business. So many communities kind of suffered a little bit of a setback during COVID. But what we find is that if you can get your dashboard and your quality of life and all your metrics in place, it really just throws this gasoline on the fire for getting things to move quickly. And as you know, if you don't start moving at a certain pace, people start to lose interest and they stop believing, and you can't have that happen. So it does bring people together, things like this. You got the conversation started, you've got a little core group moving forward. And who feels good about tonight? I mean, you got to feel good about seeing some of those numbers. You kind of know what you need to do now, right? And it also promotes understanding. What is it we're trying to do? We all have to be rowing in the same direction. Nobody can be, I always think about some communities that I go into as the rowboat, where some people are rowing backwards, some are not rowing at all, some are even dragging an anchor. Whenever we're trying to get things done. But I think if you can do more of these civic conversations, people understand the why behind what you're trying to do. If they understand the why behind what you're trying to do, the how and the what just gets so much easier. And when people start to understand what you're trying to do and they get positive about things, they engage, they show up for meetings like this. They'll help you do things, especially when things get hard. And all of this kind of lays the groundwork for other big initiatives if you're trying to do things in the community. If you can get people gelled inside of a group and create this vibrant community kind of feel, you can move lots of other big initiatives through. So there's a story that Quinn always tells us that there's two frogs kind of sitting on a lily pad and one decides to jump. How many frogs are left? Well, the answer is two, because deciding to do something and actually doing it are two different things. Again, I can't say enough about One Acadiana and this group's ability to execute on things. And what you're doing right now is just the tenacious part of things. You got to stick in there, get it done, pay attention to where you're heading, narrate the progress, narrate what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, explain to people, you know, if we want people to move here, these are the things we have to fix. You know, in Pensacola, kind of the burning platform there is we want our young people to stay home and have a place to work, and we want people who left to come back, and it's actually working quite well for them. Back to the Phil Collins song, there's another line from there that I love, and it's, I've been waiting for this moment all my life. There's probably some of you in this room who've been thinking about what you could be, what this community could be, and thinking about how long you've been waiting. So you guys have to be incredibly excited about the course that you're on and the path that you're taking. I cannot wait to see what happens in this community, but this is your time right now. The world is moving in the direction of people want to be in smaller towns where there's more opportunity. COVID exacerbated that. You have the opportunity of a lifetime. You're an incredible sweet spot, especially after hearing some of the statistics they gave tonight about innovation. Young people want to be in communities where they can be part of the system. They don't have to, you know, I'm not putting down Austin or Nashville or places like that, but they'll just be a number there. Here, they can really be part of the fabric that creates this incredible community. So here's my number. If you have any questions, I have a ton of resources. You know, I'm in and out of communities all the time. Write a lot of stuff for Strong Towns, write a lot of stuff for Quint. So while I may not have touched on it here tonight, I have a ton of resources. If there's anything you're interested in, particularly around the managing of the change of what needs to happen inside of a community, I think Quint's probably already talked to you about this, but you know, the change cycle is in the beginning is usually, we call it defiance, compliance, reliance. When things start to change, you're going to see a lot of defiance, and then people will start to comply, and then pretty soon they'll be reliant on the new way of doing things because they can't imagine not doing that. I always think about the seatbelt law. Did any of you come of age during the seatbelt law? Do you remember your parents grumbling about the seatbelt? So there was defiance in the beginning. Then the compliance started because it was a law and you got fined if you didn't do it. And then eventually there's the reliance. You couldn't imagine getting in a car right now and not wearing a seatbelt. But as you're managing this change, think about that, what's going to happen, and just know, we always tell people, if you can tell people what's going to happen and they're expecting it, we always compare it to the running of a marathon. If you've never run a marathon before and nobody told you you're going to hit a wall at mile 20, you might quit. You're going to hit a wall. There's a lot of excitement right now, but it's going to get harder as things go on, then it's going to get easier. Stick with it. I promise you, you have something incredibly special here, and I look forward to watching you blossom so I can move back here. My kids are all about to leave. Thanks.
Dottie, thank you very much. And Dr. Barnes, Dr. Wagner, thank you very much for everything you've done and for your time tonight and for your presentations. I want to thank our sponsors again, our presenting sponsors, Schumacher Family Foundation, and partner with LHC Group. And Mark Willis with LHC Group is here tonight. We didn't think he was going to be, but he did show up. But I asked him if he wanted to say a few words, and he said, no, me being here doesn't mean I want to speak. So, so yeah, there he is right there. So thank you for everything you guys do. We really appreciate your presenting sponsorship. Thank you to our supporting sponsors, Pinnacle Group and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Louisiana. And thank you very much to our media partner, the Acadiana Advocate. And thank you very much, Sam, to ACA for for the venue. We greatly appreciate it. I do want to wrap up with this, and I was supposed to advance the slide, so I apologize. I've failed you again, Lindsay. There we go. Please check out the dashboard. Look around on it. Get familiar with it. We're going to be continuing to work with the Blanco Center to update these data points, most of which will be updated annually. So we're keep a lookout for those updates. And I want to leave you with this, if possible. We need help. You know, Dottie pointed out the negativity that a lot of communities face, and we face a lot of that here. I know that you've all heard it. I know you've all heard the negativity that goes on. You know, no organization's doing it properly. No organization's doing it right. That's not true. We've got a lot of organizations doing it right. We've got a lot of organizations doing their best. Yeah, there are some things on there that we could work on. If you look at those data points, there are some negative things on there. We're not hiding from that. But there are also some very strong positive things in those data points, and we need to celebrate those things. We need to carry those data points in front of us, those positive things in front of us like a shield, so that we can keep moving forward to correct those that we do need to work on. We're heading in the right direction. We all need to be rowing in the same direction. That's what will be helpful. So when you hear a naysayer, when you hear somebody being negative about our community, correct them. Take the time to say, that's not exactly right. Point out the positive things going to them. We're sending out right now, you all should have received it, a Vibrant Acadiana newsletter. Well, we're focusing on the positive things. We're not ignoring the negatives, but we want to focus on the positives. We want to be a positive messenger for our community because we've got a lot of things going right in this community. And we want to keep those things focused, and we want to keep those things in the forefront, and we want to make those things even better. One Acadiana can't do it by themselves. We have a number of partners in this audience right now that we work with daily, and we appreciate the help and support that we get from them. We want to extend that partnership. We want to extend those voices, those positive messengers, and we need help from each and every one of you. So thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you to those that watched online, and be on the lookout for information about our next CivicCon event, which will be happening this summer. Dr. Wagner, Dr. Barnes, and Dottie will be around here for a little while if you have questions. If not, if you don't have questions for them tonight, if you want to reach out to them, they're easy to find. We can help you find them if you need to. Thank you all, and I hope everyone has a great evening.